Our next speaker brings an interesting topic to the table on robotics and ethics. David Varney joins us from Burges Salmon and is a senior associate in the technology team and advises on a range of data protection, technology, intellectual property, and commercial matters. All these advances in tech really do make for uncharted legal territory. We definitely need the right minds and right infrastructure to ensure the growth of technology is carried forward in the right way. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about robotics and ethics. Before I dive into that, actually, Professor Pipe was talking about something that I also went to talk about recently, a couple of weeks ago, on driverless cars. And there was an engineer from Jaguar Land Rover there who was talking about trust in driverless cars. And obviously, trust and ethics are interlinked. This engineer was saying that in order for people to trust a particular car, it has to drive 1,000 times better than a person. And given that obviously we're all worse drivers than we think we are, and driving well is a very subjective standard, how is that measured? How do people work that out? I just thought it was an interesting question. So I'm here today to talk about robotics and ethics. So there's a few questions that come up when you think about those kind of issues. How do you balance the interests of society and technological progress against individual rights on potentially invasive issues like AI in healthcare, facial recognition, and neural interfaces? How do we allocate rights and responsibilities in a world of connected devices and real-time automated decisions? How much thought does the law require organisations and tech vendors to put into what is right in an ethical sense and what their customers would expect to happen with their data? The fourth industrial revolution generally, and AI in particular, raise profound questions about the nature, timing and extent of the rise of new industries, displacement of employment, societal change and ethics. One of the key concerns referred to in this slide is around automation, is the idea of robots taking our jobs and how laws can keep up with changing technology. So to look for one example, an area of law I practice in, as our chatbot just told you, is data protection. So, for example, GDPR, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, is a principle-based law. It sets out general rules which can then be applied to a range of facts and scenarios, whether that's how a local sports club looks after members' contact details, or how big data can be used by a tech giant in health research. It means the law can continue to be relevant even when technologies are developed that weren't thought of when that law was being drafted. For example, the legislation that GDPR replaced in the UK, the 1998 Data Protection Act, was itself created from a 1996 European directive, which basically predated the internet. So interpretation of the current thicket of interlocking and overlapping law around AI and robotics is complex, and increasingly we see broad ethical questions being asked and raised around how data technology is being used. I mention AI as just one of a number of technologies which materially impact all our lives and jobs. Other related tech, some of which are enabled or enable AI, would include big data, implantable neurotechnologies, or the wearable internet, the Internet of Things, connected homes, smart cities. One forecast is that worldwide spending on AI systems will reach $36 billion this year, which is an increase of 44% on the 2018 figure, and more than double to $80 billion in 2022. Global spending on AI will be led by the retail and banking industries, and the applications that receive most investment this year will be automated customer service agents, sales process recommendation and automation, and automated threat intelligence and prevention systems. So we're also seeing a new line of business. Here we go. New emerging business models within the AI framework, where basically these big tech vendors, such as Amazon, Microsoft, Google, IBM Watson, license the use of AI machine learning platforms, where pricing for their services is dictated by a number of computing hours, transactions, and training units. The customers of these platforms are likely to be large-end public and private sector organizations doing their own AI developments, and also the thousands of specialist AI providers that are likely to proliferate in the next few years. This slide shows a number of patent applications relating to AI up to 2017, and shows how there's been an exponential increase in the past decade. I got this from a UK Intellectual Property Office report, so I'm pretty sure this is just UK patents only. In general, it's a massive current annual growth in digital data that's fueling the cloud, AI, and the fourth industrial revolution, which is a proliferation of big data and massive data sets for people to trial technology on. So with all this increase in data, robotics, machine learning, technology, this demonstrates that governments see a need for increased regulation and legislation around robotics and AI. And here are some of the government bodies and legislation that's been passed already. Turning back briefly to the idea of robotic employment, the EU voted against this in 2017, but talk persists of introducing a tax on robots. One of the pillars of the EU's current AI policy is to prepare for socio-economic changes brought about by AI, including setting up dedicated training schemes for professionals. So AI is starting to give our government and the European governments a lot to grapple with. Key questions along the lines of what interests should AI regulation protect? Should existing structures be adapted in terms of regulation or new ones and new laws put in place? How should regulatory burdens be kept proportionate? And what role should government play, or is it for the market to lead this? In the UK, the government's identified putting the UK at the forefront of the AI and data revolution as one of its challenges. They therefore proposed a new framework for AI, which consists of a new AI council to bring together respected leaders from academia and industry, a new office for AI as a delivery body within the government on the side, a new centre for data ethics and innovation, and the Alan Turing Institute as National Institute for Data Science and AI. Obviously, the position in the UK is complicated by Brexit at the moment, and a lot of government energy in terms of policy thinking and decisions at high levels being put forward into Brexit and what that means for us going forward. But in terms of further regulation, the Law Commission is conducting at the moment a 3-year project on autonomous vehicles. The FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, is expected to publish final guidance on how the current framework treats crypto assets, including blockchain. And as we'll see later, there have been changes to the law regarding drones this year as well. So these are the kind of main concerns with robotics that the EU's put in place. One of their policies is to ensure an appropriate ethical, legal and framework for AI. So obviously ethics is a wide forum for debate, with issues ranging, as we've heard from Professor Pipe, how to program driverless cars to handle dangerous scenarios. So is it morally defensible for a car to injure fewer people if it means more serious accidents? And liability for crimes committed by robots as well. Basically, the EU and UK government are not so much concerned with the idea of robot sentience, robots becoming aware of the human threat to their existence and launching preemptive nuclear strikes, as they are with who pays if robots goes wrong. So the Commission's put forward a European approach to artificial intelligence being based on 3 pillars. Being ahead of technology and encouraging uptake by the public and private sectors. I think we're doing that very well in the UK at the moment, particularly in the autonomous vehicle area. Preparing for socio-economic changes brought about by AI, and ensuring an appropriate legal and ethical framework. The Commission has also highlighted 7 key requirements for trustworthy AI, which translates to the 6 items in the wheels. Human agency and oversight. AI systems should support individuals in making better, more informed choices in accordance with their goals. Technical robustness and safety. Trustworthy AI requires algorithms to be secure, reliable and robust enough to deal with errors or inconsistencies. Privacy and data governance. Privacy and data protection should be guaranteed at all stages of the AI system's lifecycle. Transparency. The traceability of any decisions made by the AI should be ensured. Diversity, non-discrimination and fairness. This is relatively interesting in that data sets used by AI systems, both for training and operation, may suffer from the inclusion of historic inadvertent bias, incompleteness and bad governance models. So there's an obligation on providers or developers of AI to minimise those kind of issues going forward. And then societal and environmental well-being. For AI to be considered trustworthy, its impact on the environment and other sentient beings should be taken into account. Ideally, all humans, including all future generations, should benefit from biodiversity and habitable environments. So I guess someone at least has seen Terminator films when they wrote that down. Accountability mechanisms should be put in place to ensure responsibility and accountability for AI systems and their outcomes, both before and after implementation. And then on the right-hand side, I've set down some of the legal issues that arise through use of AI. For example, the first two, copyright. Copyright law doesn't recognise non-human authors. You might recall there was a case 2 or 3 years ago about a monkey taking a selfie. I never thought I'd say that in a conference. But the issue there arose because the photographer had set up a camera to take photos when on a proximity alert, basically, because he was finding difficulty getting monkey photos on this island in Indonesia, I think. A monkey came along, played with the camera, pressed a shutter, took a photo. A magazine wanted to publish it, and the guy was saying, "You can't do that, that's my copyright, I took the photo." And ridiculously, it went to court over whether the photographer or the monkey owned the copyright in the photo he took. So the point here is that copyright law doesn't recognise non-human authors. So if a robot paints a picture, composes a symphony, writes a novel, and if any of those win any awards, who will own the copyright in that, and what the consequences be? And then patents as well. At the moment, well, I assume that AI will invent things, it'll create new ways of doing things. There's a query around how patentable any inventions created by AI would be, because again, the law at the moment says that we need to have a human author or a human inventor. So what does that all mean in practice? I thought it would be quite helpful to talk about a case study of how the laws changed as a consequence of robotics or AI. And the case study I was going to talk about was the incident at Gatwick last Christmas with the drone. So prior to this event last year, drone use was regulated in the UK through the Air Navigation Order 2016, which basically says that any person flying a drone must not recklessly or negligently cause or permit their aircraft to endanger any person, aircraft or property. This is supplemented by a number of other areas in the guidance relating to the use of drones which weigh no more than 20 kilos. Anything other than that limit, over that limit, is dealt with by different rules under the Civil Aviation Authority. So basically, drones under 20 kilos must be flown with, or had to be flown in direct line of sight of the pilot at all times, above 400 foot, not within, not be flown not above 400 foot, not within 50 metres of people, buildings, aircraft, not within 1 kilometre of an airport, and not within 150 metres of built up or busy areas. So in summary, the previous regime was based around regulating the areas in which the drone could operate. That all changed from the Gatwick incident last year, which you might recall was the 19th to 21st of December, so just before Christmas. There were multiple sightings of a drone over the runway, which led to the airport being shut. 1,000 flights were diverted or cancelled over 3 days, and it affected approximately 140,000 passengers, and that's just one robot behaving badly. Police suspected that the perpetrator was an experienced drone pilot operating somewhere around the airport. And they said that he or she might have had access to airport communications as well, because they seemed to know exactly when the runway was going to reopen and make the drone reappear at that time. That led police to think it maybe was an inside job. They arrested a couple of people in the aftermath, but they were subsequently released without charge, and the perpetrator is to this day at liberty. No one knows who did it or where they are. So the response to that, the UK government introduced more stringent regulation. The police and government response had failed in 2 ways. Number one, the airport lacked security infrastructure to take down or secure the drone once it was identified. You might recall, I think they brought in eagles or hawks from the Netherlands to try and stop it. And secondly, the police can identify the pilot, where they were, who they were, how they were doing it. So while the government was quick to invest in technology to remedy the first failing, the responses to the second were regulatory and preventative in nature. The first major change in March this year was to extend the definition of protected aerodrome, so to create a larger buffer zone around airports where drones could not be used. And the second major change, which was introduced in May this year and comes into effect next week, was a new drone law. So the new regulation in the UK basically says that to fly a drone you have to be over 18, register with Civil Aviation Authority, be in possession of an operator ID, display that ID on any drone in your possession, and the pilot, I said, had to be over 18, didn't I already? But there's still a light touch regime in respect of drones under 20 kilos in weight. I'm guessing they aren't deemed to be as much of an impact on aircraft. So the EU has also updated its laws following Gatwick. Did this in May. We've had 2 regulations. The first imposes requirements for the design, manufacture, distribution of drones, seeking to ensure preventative measures built into newer devices. And secondly, the EU rule has been updated relating to operators and pilots again. So effectively now there's a registration requirement if you have a drone, so that if it does start to go AWOL, you can be found. And that's just one example of where the law has had to change to keep up with technology, because the thing about the law and the thing I see being a tech lawyer is often the advice I give to my clients is based on a legislative regime that's 5, 10, sometimes even 20 years out of date. And as technology continues to progress, it's going to be more and more difficult for law to keep up with the changes. One of the interesting things at the moment, this is slightly off topic, the interesting things at the moment is the idea of a technology regulator. So one of the themes in big tech right now is the lack of competition. And that's a real tension between the European Union and the kind of West Coast US ethos. So the EU has had in its sights for a very long time, kind of 20 years now, massive global monopolistic tech giants that are an absolute anathema to Brussels, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all firmly in the crosshairs of the EU Commission because of their large anti-competitive empires they've built basically on the back of data and robotics. In law, one of the interesting things coming up, because obviously the profession I work in hasn't really changed for 200 years. We train from sitting in an office with someone more senior, which sounds like it could come from a Dickensian novel or something. But we're seeing a lot of legal tech at the moment, so ways in which robotics and AI can improve the legal system, contract reviews, smart contracts, document reviews, which ultimately leads to more efficiencies and better value for clients. But I think that's probably my time. Thank you.